Hi, I'm Samira Arenas Fernandez. Today, we are exploring a crisis that sits at the intersection of environmental destruction, historical policy, and human rights. The crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, also referred to as MMIW, is a profound injustice affecting all tribal nations, and in today's topic, I will cover the Navajo Nation. As an aspiring social worker, I'm driven to understand how the environmental shockwaves from land exploitation directly impact the safety and dignity of Indigenous women. We will move from the history of the Diné people to the modern day man camps of the oil industry, and finally to the grassroots movements where the community is reclaiming its power through data sovereignty and cultural healing. To understand this issue, we must first understand the land. The Navajo Nation, known as the Diné, or the people, is the largest federally recognized tribal nation in the United States, spanning 27,000 square miles across Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Their homeland, Diné Bikayah, is a place of deep spiritual and ancestral significance. However, it is also a land rich in resources like uranium and coal. This wealth of natural resources has made the Navajo Nation a peripheral region and an area targeted for extraction to fuel the energy demands of a wealthy core nation like the United States. As sociologist and veteran James Fenelon from the Lakota and Dakota tribal nations argues that this globalization has turned Navajo lands into zones of extraction where the government and multinational corporations have historically exploited resources while leaving the Diné to face environmental devastation and health crises. Advocate Lawrence Lack describes this process as mining the land and undermining the people. He argues that when we talk about mining on indigenous land, we aren't just talking about removing rocks. We're talking about a direct assault on the community's soul. This is because mining and undermining go hand in hand. You cannot strip mine a landscape without also stripping away the sovereignty, health, and future of the people living there. These territories become sacrifice zones where corporate profits are weighed as more important than the actual lives of the people on the land. This damage happens in layers. Environmentally, the poisoned water and ruined soil are permanent. Economically and personally, these industries destroy traditional ways of life, forcing families into a trap of poverty and dependency. For the Diné, whose identity is anchored to specific mountains and rivers, scarring the earth is an attempt to erase their very history. The impact on the Navajo Nation goes far beyond environmental damage, affecting the health, economy, and cultural identity of the community while also connecting directly to the MMIW crisis. Many people face serious health issues due to exposure to polluted water, toxic waste, and the long-term effects of mining. At the same time, the destruction of the land has led to a loss of traditional livelihoods, making it harder for families to sustain themselves through practices passed down for generations. This instability and economic hardship can increase vulnerability, especially for Indigenous women. Beyond physical and economic harm, there is also deep cultural and spiritual damage, as the land holds sacred meaning for the Navajo people. When these connections are disrupted, it weakens community structure and support systems that once helped protect women, which contributes to the conditions that allow the MMIW crisis to persist. This historical context is vital because it creates the blueprint for the MMIW crisis today. As researcher Clara M. Downey argues, this violence is not a string of random crimes, but rather it is the direct result of centuries of government policy. We cannot look at today's violence without looking at the laws designed to strip Indigenous people of their land and rights. Policies like the forced removal of children to boarding schools and the relocation of families to urban centers intentionally broke down the traditional social structures that once kept Indigenous women safe. These policies have left behind a legal maze where tribal, state, and federal police often fail to communicate. This confusion creates a jurisdictional vacuum where predators feel they can act with impunity because they know the system is too broken to catch them. The high rates of violence we see today are the lingering shadow of a system built to marginalize these communities from the start. The MMIW crisis is not random violence, but rather a systemic issue that has developed over time. It is not just a series of isolated incidents, but the result of deeper structural problems. One major factor is the jurisdictional gaps between the tribal, state, and federal governments, where it is often unclear who is responsible for investigating crimes. Because of this confusion, many perpetrators are not held accountable, which creates an environment where violence is more likely to continue. This shows that the crisis is not only about individual acts of violence, but about a larger system that has failed to protect Indigenous women. We see a modern iteration of this violence in what Julia Stern calls the pipeline of violence. There is a disturbing link between the expansion of the oil industry and the rise in violence against Indigenous women. The influx of transient workers into man camps, temporary housing sites near extraction projects, often leads to a surge in human trafficking, sexual assaults, and disappearances in nearby tribal communities. These industrial projects don't just scar the land. They bring in a population that frequently operates outside the reach of local tribal law enforcement. This is a systemic issue where corporate interests and environmental destruction overlap with human rights violations. The same legal loopholes that allow companies to bypass environmental regulations often make it impossible for tribal authorities to prosecute non-native workers who commit crimes on reservation land. In this way, the extraction of natural resources becomes inseparable from the extraction of Indigenous lives. Even when federal steps are taken, such as the Not Invisible Act, the results can be frustratingly ironic. While the act was designed to coordinate a response to the MMIW crisis and increase transparency, a recent federal data purge has made things worse. This purge deleted crucial information about missing Native parents and children from national databases. Families were essentially made invisible all over again by the very system meant to see them. This data desert creates a massive hurdle for advocates and families who are already struggling with the lack of police cooperation. Without accurate data, mandates for better communication become nearly impossible to fulfill. It is a systemic breakdown where the law promises protection, but the bureaucracy erases the records needed to find the missing. But the Navajo Nation is not waiting for outside intervention. The community is moving from a history of being undermined toward a future of self-determination and healing. The Missing and Murdered Dine Relatives Coalition is a powerful volunteer-led framework that provides families with a community action toolkit and a dedicated data institute. This shift toward data sovereignty is a direct answer to the failures of the federal government. By reclaiming their own data, the Dine ensure they are no longer invisible within the systems meant to protect them. This is practical advocacy at its finest. It's the community taking the lead to recover their own loved ones and protect their own future. This advocacy is mirrored by work focused on communal resilience and cultural heritage. Navajo is strong, and projects like Art Heals, the Jingle Dress Project, use traditional dance and art as vehicles for collective healing. By documenting the spiritual places their ancestors once walked, they are reclaiming their cultural narrative. This brings us to the concept Hozo, which means peace, balance, beauty, and harmony. By restoring Hozo through homegrown resources and traditional practices, the Dine are ensuring a safer and more empowered future for generations to come. For the Navajo Nation, true sovereignty means more than just protecting the land from extraction. It means reclaiming their data, their safety, and their spirits. Here's a song I would like to share with you by Fawn Wood, who is Korean Salish from Canada, who sings a song called Remember Me, written by Randy Wood. In the description or in the comments, I will share the link for this song. In conclusion, the fight for land rights and the fight for the safety of Indigenous women are one and the same. Through my research, I have seen that while the toxic legacy of industry and policy is deep, the resilience of the Diné is deeper. My goal is to remain educated on this history and find ways to support these efforts at a local level. We must ensure that the names and faces of the missing are never lost again, and that the laws meant to save them are backed by real action and respect for tribal sovereignty. Thank you.